Welcome to Super Showdowns, the ultimate destination for epic battles and legendary showdowns. Join us as we put iconic superheroes, villains, and mythological figures against each other in thrilling matches of strength, strategy, and skill. In the cold expanse beyond time, where reality thins and universes flicker like dying embers, two shadows watched eternity unravel. The darkest night, a god born of madness, corruption, and power unimaginable, stood at the edge of the overvoid, his form towering, his crimson eyes glimmering with the hunger of infinite worlds. Every breath from him echoed like a scream through dead timelines. He had devoured the multiverse, remade Hypertime in his image, and crushed Perpetua, the mother of creation herself. Yet, even as his reign of darkness extended across endless realities, something stirred beyond his perception. Something older, quieter, and far more terrible. That presence was the empty hand. While the darkest night bent reality to his will, the empty hand simply waited. It was the stillness before the final breath of all existence, a silence that could swallow even gods. From Nil, the realm beyond creation, the empty hand observed as stories lived and died, feeding on their ends. Where the darkest night represented the corruption of life, the empty hand was the absence of it. The darkest night had felt it once, a pulse of void beyond his dominion, a vibration of something that could not be quantified. He had ignored it then, too absorbed in molding existence into a reflection of his own madness. But now, as his shadow empire spanned countless dark multiverses, he sensed it again, a pressure from beyond the walls of all things. He extended his will through the cosmic fractures of reality, reaching into Nil. There, within the infinite nothingness, stood a vast figure, a silhouette holding a cosmic sphere that looked disturbingly like a heart made of dying galaxies. The empty hand raised his palm, and even the darkest night, master of all darkness, felt a tremor in his core. "Who dares observe my creation?" The darkest night's voice thundered across dimensions. His tone was one of rage and authority, the voice of a being who had killed gods and rewritten the laws of existence. The empty hand's reply was not a sound, but an idea, cold, absolute, and older than creation. "You mistake creation for control. You mistake survival for victory. But stories end, and I am the end." The words rippled through the membranes of existence. Planets flickered out, timelines bled into void. The darkest night tightened his grip on his reality, wrapping it with chains of crisis energy. His form pulsed with the blue light of Manhattan's essence, merging with the dark hues of corrupted crisis power. "You speak in riddles," he growled. "I am the last. I am the only. When the multiverse dies, I will stand upon its corpse." The empty hand tilted his head slightly, the faint outline of a grin forming in the void. "You will feed me," he said. Suddenly, the sky above the darkest night split open like fragile glass, revealing the reflection of the great darkness, the source from which the empty hand drew his essence. Its black aura flooded the heavens, drowning light, devouring sound. The darkest night's legions, the endless army of dark Batmen and twisted deities, began to fade into nothingness, erased not by violence, but by disinterest. They ceased to be, their stories complete. The darkest night clenched his fists, and Hypertime itself responded. Streams of blue-white energy spiraled from his hands, reshaping broken timelines and resurrecting forgotten possibilities. His laugh cracked through the void, sharp, maniacal, godlike. Then let the end meet its rebirth. The power of Dr. Manhattan and crisis energy merged into a cosmic inferno, flooding the void and painting the nothingness with creation's scream. For a moment,
Hey you! Don't just watch. Subscribe please.
it seemed the darkest night's will was rewriting Nil itself, imposing reality upon unreality. But the empty hand simply raised one finger, and everything stopped. Not destroyed, not rewritten, stopped. The darkest night looked around. Motionless galaxies hung frozen. Waves of creation halted mid-surge. Even his laughter, once eternal, was trapped between moments. He could still think, but he could no longer move. That was when he realized the empty hand was not an opponent. It was the page on which his story was written. "You exist because stories need villains," the empty hand murmured, his voice calm, almost compassionate. "But every villain needs an ending." And then, for the first time since becoming the darkest night, he felt something he had long forgotten: fear of oblivion. The empty hand turned away, gazing at the flickering remains of the multiverse, like a reader closing a finished book. Yet something held his attention. The darkest night, still bound by frozen time, was smiling. "You think I'm a story," he whispered. "Then I'll rewrite myself." With that, the darkest night's body exploded into an ocean of dark light, a fusion of crisis energy and quantum awareness. He tore through the stillness with sheer willpower, shattering the pause imposed by the empty hand. Reality twisted, Nil cracked, and for the first time the empty hand felt something akin to resistance. The silence trembled. The end had met a defiant story, one that refused to stop. And thus began the greatest paradox of all existence, the battle beyond stories. The crack between realities widened, and the darkness screamed, "Nil!" The void beyond all creation rippled as two forces collided, one born of corrupted creation, the other forged from final annihilation. The darkest night surged through the stillness, tearing free from the paralysis imposed by the empty hand. His laughter boomed like thunder across the nothingness, echoing in places where sound had never existed. "Even you," he roared, "are just a page waiting to burn." Around him, fragments of Hypertime bled into Nil, reshaping the nothingness into a chaotic storm of half-formed realities. A million alternate worlds flashing in and out of existence in mere seconds. He summoned his army from these fractures, infinite dark reflections of gods, heroes and monsters. Each carried his face, the twisted smile of a bat that forgot what light was. But the empty hand merely watched. His massive form stood unmoved, the sphere he carried in his palm pulsing faintly with the light of countless extinguished universes. Then his fingers tightened. Instantly the army of dark gods froze, their forms dissolving into dust made of broken ideas. "You create," the empty hand intoned, his voice a low tremor that made reality quiver. "But I unmake." The darkest night's rage deepened. He extended both hands, merging the quantum blue of Manhattan's power with the crimson-black glow of crisis energy. A tidal wave of cosmic light burst forth, smashing into the empty hand. The shock wave tore through Nil, bending its emptiness into shapes that defied logic. Spirals of collapsing timelines, burning symbols of every fallen world. When the light faded, the empty hand still stood, his form cracked but not broken. Inside those cracks, the void stared back, infinite, unfeeling, eternal. He lowered his gaze to the darkest night, and in that moment, something impossible happened. The multiverse screamed. Every living story across all planes, from the source wall to the overvoid, trembled as the empty hand reached into existence itself. "You wield power stolen from stories," he said, his words forming waves of gravity that bent the remaining stars. "But I wield what waits when stories end." With that, he opened his palm wide. The sphere he carried, the heart of endings, exploded in brilliance, unleashing the hunger of Nil. Darkness spread not as destruction, but as erasure. Concepts faded, memory ceased. Even the darkest night's awareness began to blur at the edges, as if he were being forgotten by the very cosmos he had ruled. "No," he shouted, his voice splintering through infinity. He reached deeper, drawing upon his last reserves of quantum omniscience. His essence multiplied across infinite points of space-time. Millions of versions of himself rose, each a separate darkest night, each rewriting the laws of physics in defiance. Together they surrounded the empty hand in an ocean of living void. "I am every shadow," they declared in unison. "And shadows thrive where the light ends." The empty hand lifted his gaze, and for the first time he moved with force. His arm swung outward, and with that single motion, the fabric of Nil shattered. From behind him emerged the gentry, grotesque manifestations of despair and decay, each an extension of his will. They descended upon the legion of darkest nights, consuming them not with violence, but with hopelessness. For every one they devoured, the others weakened, as if the very concept of resistance was being rewritten. The original darkest night tried to escape, slipping through collapsing timelines, but the empty hand's reach was infinite. He extended his palm, and the universes themselves bent inward, folding like pages turning toward their final line. The darkest night launched a final attack, channeling his combined power into a single act, rewriting his own story, so that he could not lose. His form blazed like a dying sun, reality fracturing around him as he declared, "If I am the story, then you can never erase me." The empty hand's answer was simple. "You are correct. I cannot erase a story, but I can close the book." He brought his palm down. The impact created no explosion, no sound, only ending. The wave spread across Nil and beyond, extinguishing every remnant of the darkest night's power. The Hypertime fractures sealed. The armies of shadows faded like ink washed from paper, and at last there was silence. In the aftermath, the empty hand stood alone in the void, his cracked form mending itself with slow inevitability. Where the darkest night once stood, only a faint shimmer remained, a spark of crisis energy flickering weakly. The empty hand regarded it for a moment, then reached out and absorbed it into his sphere. The light vanished, swallowed whole. Even endings have echoes, he murmured, and I feed on those too. From the overvoid, unseen watchers, beings like the monitors, the chroniclers of stories, observed the aftermath in fear. They had seen creation fall before, but never like this, never so absolutely. As the empty hand turned away, the fabric of existence began to repair itself, not from mercy, but from necessity. Stories would begin anew, because even the end required beginnings to sustain itself. In that paradox lay the true balance of everything. Before vanishing back into Nil, the empty hand looked once more toward the infinite cosmos, where the next tale was already forming in the distance. "Begin again," he whispered, "so that I may end you once more." And with that, the page turned black. The darkest night was gone. The end remained,